What happens when a polished daytime talk show suddenly cracks open, and a movie star everyone thought they understood decides he's done playing nice? Before the cameras even realize what they're about to catch, before the audience senses the shift in the air, something changes. And once it does, there's no going back. If you're drawn to moments like this, raw, shocking, and unforgettable, subscribe to Stage View right now, hit like, and drop a comment as you watch, because this one isn't just an interview, it's a collision. The studio lights blaze like artificial suns, washing the set of The View in a warm, practiced glow. The audience applauds on cue, the kind of applause that's been trained by years of morning television. It's cheerful, automatic, safe. Sunny Hostin sits poised at the table, papers neatly stacked, expression composed but alert. She's done this 1,000 times, welcomed actors, politicians, activists, and icons. She knows how to guide a conversation, how to press without pushing too far, how to smile while sharpening a question. Across from her sits Orlando Bloom. He looks relaxed at first. Open collar, easy smile, the kind of presence that's earned him decades of adoration. The audience sees the pirate, the elf, the romantic lead. They see charm. What they don't see yet is the tension sitting just beneath his calm exterior, the weight he carried into the studio and never quite set down. The host finishes her introduction, praising his latest project, his philanthropy, his public image. Orlando nods politely, thanks her, his voice smooth and measured. Everything is going exactly as expected. Too exactly. Sunny leans forward slightly, eyes warm but probing. You've spoken a lot about growth lately, she says, her tone conversational. About accountability. About listening. Especially in a time when audiences are asking celebrities to be more self-aware than ever. Orlando smiles. A small one. The kind that doesn't quite reach his eyes. Sure, he says. I think growth is essential. For anyone. The audience hums with approval. This is familiar territory. Safe territory. Sunny glances down at her notes, then back up. Some critics, though, feel that certain stars only embrace accountability when it's convenient. That the messaging sounds good, but the actions don't always follow. How do you respond to people who say that about you? There it is. The first hairline fracture. Orlando shifts in his chair. It's subtle, but the camera catches it. A breath taken just a second too late. His jaw tightens, then releases. Inside his head, something stirs. Memories of headlines, half-quoted interviews, assumptions made by people who've never sat across from him, never asked how it felt to be flattened into a narrative. I think, he says slowly, that a lot of people talk about accountability without really understanding what it costs. Sunny nods, encouraging. And what does it cost? The audience leans in. Even the co-hosts sense the shift. This is no longer a promotional stop. It costs privacy, Orlando continues. It costs being allowed to change without being punished forever for who you were before. Sunny's expression sharpens, not hostile, but firm. But public figures benefit from public platforms. Doesn't that come with responsibility to the audience? A pause stretches. The lights hum. Somewhere off camera, a producer stiffens. Orlando looks directly at Sunny now. Not at the audience. Not at the camera. At her. Responsibility, he says, doesn't mean surrendering your humanity. The room is quieter now. A few audience members exchange glances. This is different. Sunny keeps her voice calm. No one's asking for surrender. But when voices speak up, especially marginalized voices, shouldn't celebrities listen instead of pushing back? There's the word. Pushback. Orlando exhales through his nose, a sound that's half laugh, half release. I listen, he says. What I don't do anymore is accept being spoken about as if I'm not in the room. A ripple moves through the crowd. One woman's applause starts, then falters. Another gasps softly. Sunny straightens. Are you saying that questions like this are unfair? I'm saying, Orlando replies, his tone still controlled but edged now, that there's a difference between dialogue and accusation. The temperature in the studio drops, even as the lights stay warm. This wasn't on the rundown. This wasn't rehearsed. Sunny doesn't back down. She never does. From where many people sit, she says, power protects you. Criticism doesn't end careers the way silence can end trust. For a split second, Orlando looks away. And in that moment, the mask slips. I've lost trust, he says quietly. I've lost years of my life trying to be who people demanded instead of who I was becoming. You can hear it now. The murmur. The audience isn't sure who to root for, and that uncertainty buzzes like static. Sunny's voice softens, but her words don't. Pain doesn't erase accountability. Orlando nods once. And accountability doesn't justify cruelty. A sharp intake of breath echoes from somewhere behind the cameras. One of the co-hosts shifts uncomfortably, glancing between them, silently calculating whether to intervene. The producers are likely shouting in headsets, debating whether to cut to commercial. But it's too late. This moment is alive. Sunny folds her hands. Do you feel attacked right now? Orlando meets her gaze. I feel cornered. And I think a lot of people watching know exactly what that feels like. Applause breaks out, real applause this time. Not everyone, but enough. Sunny's eyes flick briefly toward the audience, then back to Orlando. This platform exists to ask hard questions. And I'm here to give honest answers, he says. Even when they don't fit the soundbite. Silence stretches again, heavy and electric. The cameras keep rolling, capturing every blink, every microexpression. Somewhere on social media, fingers are already flying. Clips are being cued before the segment is even over. Sunny inhales, preparing her next move. And Orlando, for the first time since he sat down, looks like a man who has decided he has nothing left to lose. The confrontation has only just begun. The silence after Orlando's last sentence doesn't just hang in the studio, it presses down on it. Sunny Hostin holds her posture, professional and composed, but there's a flicker now, something unmistakably human behind her eyes. This isn't the smooth terrain of morning TV anymore. This is live wire territory, and everyone knows it. The applause that broke out fades awkwardly, uneven, like rain that starts and stops without warning. A producer's voice crackles faintly through an earpiece somewhere off stage. The red light on the main camera remains on. They're still live. Sunny tilts her head slightly. Feeling cornered, she repeats carefully. That's a strong word. Orlando doesn't rush to respond. He lets the weight of it settle. He's aware of every camera trained on him, every reaction in the audience, every co-host frozen in that split-second calculation of whether this is about to explode or collapse inward. It is a strong word, he says. But it's an honest one. Whoopi Goldberg shifts in her seat, arms crossing loosely. Joy Behar's lips part as if she might jump in, then close again. Even they sense this is no longer a panel discussion. It's a face-off. Sunny leans forward, elbows lightly touching the table. You know, she says, when people hear you say that, they might think you're dismissing criticism altogether. Orlando shakes his head. No, I'm rejecting the idea that criticism has to be dehumanizing to be valid. A murmur ripples through the crowd. Someone whispers, oof. Someone else nods vigorously. Sunny's voice tightens, just a fraction. But when people call out behavior, they're often responding to patterns. Patterns that celebrities benefit from ignoring. There it is again. The implication. The invisible finger pointed without naming the accusation. Orlando's jaw clenches. Inside him, something long suppressed begins to rise. Years of carefully worded apologies, of interviews where he smiled through discomfort, of moments where he swallowed frustration because that's the job. I didn't ignore them, he says. I internalized them. And do you know what that does to a person? Sunny doesn't answer. It makes you feel like no amount of change will ever be enough, Orlando continues. His voice is louder now, not shouting, but carrying. Like you're permanently frozen in the worst version of yourself that someone else decided was marketable. A collective intake of breath sweeps the room. One audience member claps, just once, then stops, unsure if it's appropriate. Sunny straightens, her tone firmer. But public accountability isn't about your comfort. It's about impact. Orlando's eyes flash. And when does impact become punishment? That lands hard. The studio feels smaller now, like the walls have moved inward. The cheerful pastel set suddenly feels absurdly fragile, like a stage prop built to hold laughter, not confrontation. Sunny pauses. She chooses her words carefully, but there's an edge now. You're a powerful man, Orlando. Fame insulates you in ways most people will never experience. He lets out a short, humorless laugh. You think fame insulated me from shame? The audience reacts audibly this time. Gasps. Whispers. Someone says, wow. Sunny doesn't flinch. It insulates you from consequences. That's the spark. Orlando leans forward, mirroring her posture now. Consequences, he repeats. Do you know how many doors quietly closed without explanation? How many meetings stopped happening? How many times I was told, not now, maybe later, and later never came? Sunny's eyebrows lift. So you're saying you were canceled? I'm saying, he replies, that the narrative decided who I was before I had a chance to show who I became. The co-hosts exchange looks. This is dangerous ground, language that ignites comment sections, that fractures audiences instantly. Sunny's voice sharpens. Many people would say that facing criticism is not the same as being silenced. And many people, Orlando fires back, have never had their entire identity reduced to a headline. A low ripples through the audience. Whoopi finally shifts forward. She begins, attempting to step in. Sunny raises a hand gently, eyes still locked on Orlando. No, it's okay. I want to understand this. The words are calm, but the energy isn't. Then understand this, Orlando says, his voice dropping, quieter but more intense. When you sit across from someone and frame the conversation like they're on trial, you're not inviting growth. You're performing judgment. The word trial echoes. Sunny's lips press together. That's your interpretation. And this, Orlando replies, is my lived experience. The audience erupts, this time split. Some clap enthusiastically. Others remain stone still. A few shake their heads. Sunny takes a breath. You can almost see the internal recalibration. She's not losing control, but she's no longer steering easily. Do you think, she asks slowly, that pushing back like this risks alienating the very people you claim to want dialogue with? Orlando considers that. For a moment, the anger recedes, replaced by something rawer. I think silence already alienated me from myself. That lands differently. Softer. Sadder. For a brief second, the room stills. Sunny's gaze flickers. That sounds painful. It was, he says simply. Is. The audience quiets, sensing the vulnerability beneath the defensiveness. But Sunny doesn't let the moment rest. Pain doesn't absolve responsibility, she says again, more gently this time. Orlando nods. I'm not asking it to. Then he adds, I'm asking for space to be imperfect without being condemned. A beat. Sunny glances at her notes, then back up. Some would argue that public figures asking for space often translates to avoiding hard truths. Orlando exhales sharply. And some would argue that public shaming masquerading as accountability is just cruelty with better branding. That line hits like a thunderclap. The audience reacts instantly, loud, chaotic, divided. Applause collides with stunned silence. Someone audibly says, "Oh my God." One of the co-hosts whispers something off mic. A producer's voice urgently crackles again. Sunny's eyes widen, just a fraction, before she regains composure. That's a serious accusation. So is implying someone is morally bankrupt without naming the charge, Orlando responds. The tension is unbearable now. This is no longer a disagreement. It's a philosophical standoff playing out in real time on live television. Sunny sits back slightly. I think viewers can decide for themselves. Orlando nods. I hope they do. Fully. Honestly. The camera cuts briefly to the audience. Faces frozen in awe, discomfort, fascination. Phones subtly raised despite rules against it. People know they're witnessing something that will live far beyond this hour. Sunny turns back to Orlando. We're almost out of time. A loaded sentence. Orlando smiles faintly. Funny how that always happens when conversations get uncomfortable. A sharp gasp. Nervous laughter. Sunny doesn't respond immediately. When she does, her voice is cool. Thank you for being here. The words are polite but final. Orlando inclines his head. Thank you for having me. The applause that follows is loud, fractured, emotionally confused. As the cameras pull back and the segment wraps, no one on that set believes they just witnessed a standard interview. Something irreversible has happened. Lines have been drawn, not just between two people, but between audiences, ideologies, and expectations of what daytime television is supposed to be. And as the show cuts to commercial, social media ignites. Clips are already circulating. Hashtags begin forming. Opinions harden in real time. This wasn't just pushback. It was a rupture. And the fallout is only beginning. The commercial break ends, but the atmosphere doesn't reset. If anything, it thickens. The View's theme music fades in, bright and cheerful, wildly out of sync with the emotional residue left hanging in the studio. The applause sign lights up again, urging the audience to clap, to smile, to pretend they're back in familiar territory. The applause comes, but it's hesitant now, uneven, like people clapping at a funeral reception because they don't know what else to do. Orlando Bloom is still seated at the table. That alone feels unexpected. Most guests would have been ushered off quietly during the break, tension smoothed over, segment wrapped with polite distance. But Orlando stayed, either by choice or because no one quite knew how to end this cleanly. Sunny Hostin adjusts the papers in front of her, a subtle grounding ritual. Her face is composed, but there's a new rigidity to her posture. This isn't just about him anymore. It's about control of the room, of the narrative. The red light blinks back on. "We're back," Sunny says smoothly, her broadcast voice returning like armor sliding into place. "Before we move on, I want to give you a chance to clarify something." Orlando looks at her, expression unreadable. "Okay," she nods. "You used the phrase public shaming masquerading as accountability. Some viewers might feel that minimizes real harm." The audience quiets instantly. Orlando inhales slowly. This is the moment where most celebrities retreat, apologize for tone, soften language. The expectation hangs in the air like a script cue. But he doesn't retreat. "I don't think harm is minimized by questioning how we address it," he says. "I think harm is compounded when we stop seeing people as capable of change." Sunny's lips press together. "But accountability requires discomfort." "So does growth," Orlando replies. "But they're not the same thing." A co-host shifts closer to her microphone. "Can I jump in for a second?" she asks, trying to diffuse. Sunny nods, but her eyes never leave Orlando. "Orlando," the co-host says gently, "do you think you might be projecting some of your frustration onto this conversation?" The word lands carefully, almost kindly. Orlando considers it. "I think frustration has been projected onto me for years," he says. "This is just the first time I didn't absorb it quietly." That earns a low murmur of approval. Sunny leans forward again. "Do you understand why that might feel threatening to people who are used to celebrities avoiding accountability altogether?" "Yes," Orlando says. "And I also understand why constantly demanding performance-level remorse becomes exhausting." The audience reacts again, this time louder, more polarized. Applause clashes with audible dissent. Sunny's tone sharpens. "So where's the line, Orlando? Where do you draw it?" He doesn't hesitate. "At dignity." The single word lands heavier than any long explanation. Sunny exhales through her nose. "Dignity for whom?" "For everyone," he says, "including the person being criticized." There's a pause. Not dead air, but something close to it. The kind of silence producers fear and audiences lean into. Sunny's gaze hardens slightly. "That sounds idealistic." Orlando nods. "It probably is. But I'd rather be idealistic than performatively outraged." That's it. That's the moment. The studio erupts, not fully, but enough to feel seismic. A mix of claps, groans, sharp inhales. Someone in the audience whispers, "He said that on The View." Sunny's eyes widen before she reins it back in. "Performatively outraged?" she repeats. "Are you accusing people on this panel of that?" The air goes razor thin. Orlando shakes his head, slow and deliberate. "I'm accusing the culture we all participate in." Sunny sits back. "Including yourself?" "Yes," he says immediately. "Absolutely." That answer catches her off guard. A flicker passes across her face, surprise, maybe even reluctant respect. But the tension doesn't release. "Then why push back so hard right now?" she asks. "Why here?" Orlando looks around the studio. The audience, the cameras, the pastel walls that suddenly feel like they're closing in. When he speaks, his voice is quieter, stripped of edge. "Because this is where conversations are supposed to happen," he says. "Not verdicts." The audience stills. "And because," he adds, "I'm tired of being spoken about in rooms I'm invited into as if I'm not sitting right here." A woman in the audience nods vigorously, whispering, "Yes." Sunny studies him. The professional in her recognizes the gravity of the moment. The human in her feels the challenge. "You're asking for nuance," she says. "I'm demanding it," Orlando replies. "For everyone." The co-hosts exchange looks. One of them clears her throat. This is intense. A few nervous laughs ripple through the crowd. Sunny glances briefly toward the camera, then back to Orlando. "You know this will be clipped, taken out of context." Orlando smiles faintly. "Everything is. And you're okay with that?" "I'm okay with being misunderstood," he says. "I'm not okay with being silent." That line hits like a closing argument. Sunny taps her pen against the table once, a barely contained gesture. "I don't think anyone here asked for your silence." "No," Orlando agrees. "But I've been rewarded for it before." That stings. The audience reacts audibly. Someone lets out a low damn. Sunny's jaw tightens. "You're implying complicity." "I'm describing a system," Orlando replies. one that prefers polished apologies over honest dialogue. The tension now is no longer personal, it's ideological. This isn't Sunny versus Orlando. It's two worldviews colliding in front of a live audience. Sunny's voice softens again, but there's steel underneath. You're on a platform that gives voice to people who rarely get heard. And I respect that, Orlando says. That's why I'm not yelling. That's why I'm not walking out. The audience senses it too. This is restraint, not meltdown. Sunny studies him for a long moment. Then she asks quietly, "Do you regret anything you've said today?" The question hangs like a final test. Orlando thinks. Truly thinks. "No," he says. "But I regret how afraid I was to say it sooner." A hush falls over the studio. For the first time since this began, Sunny doesn't respond immediately. When she does, her voice is measured. "Some viewers will see this as bravery," she says. "Others will see it as defensiveness." Orlando nods. "I can live with that." Another pause. Sunny exhales, then offers a small, controlled smile. "We're going to take a breath." The audience laughs nervously. "And then," she adds, "we'll move on." The words are an attempt at closure, but the energy refuses to cooperate. As the cameras widen and the segment finally transitions, Orlando sits back in his chair, shoulders heavy, eyes distant. He looks like someone who's just stepped out of a storm and isn't sure yet how much damage was done. Sunny turns toward the next topic, professionalism restored. But there's a stiffness now, an awareness that this show will not be remembered for whatever comes next. In living rooms across the country, people stare at their screens, stunned. Twitter explodes. TikTok clips begin circulating before the broadcast even ends. Commentators take sides instantly. Orlando Bloom just said what everyone's afraid to say. Sunny Hostin destroys celebrity entitlement. That was uncomfortable and necessary. That was disrespectful. That was real. By the time the show signs off, the narrative has escaped them all. And Orlando Bloom walks off that stage knowing one thing for certain. Whatever comes next will be louder than anything that happened under those studio lights. And the reckoning, public, relentless, unavoidable, is just getting started. The moment the cameras cut, the room exhales, but not in relief. It's the kind of exhale that comes after an earthquake, when people are still standing but unsure which structures are damaged beyond repair. Applause breaks out again, reflexive this time, but it doesn't have the same rhythm. Some audience members stand. Others remain seated, arms crossed, faces tight with thought or disagreement. A few look stunned, like they've just witnessed something they weren't emotionally prepared to process at 10 in the morning. Orlando Bloom rises from his chair slowly. There's no victory in his posture. No defiance. Just wait. Sunny Hostin gathers her notes with practiced precision. She doesn't look at him at first. When she does, it's brief, professional, controlled, unreadable. No handshake. No lingering exchange. Just two people acknowledging that something irreversible has passed between them. Backstage, producers scramble. Voices overlap. Did we cut that clip? We need to prep a statement. Social is blowing up, right now. A PA glances at her phone, eyes widening. Someone else mutters, "This is already trending." Orlando walks down the narrow hallway toward the exit, the cheerful studio decor now feeling almost mocking. Staff members step aside, unsure whether to offer support or distance. One young assistant catches his eye and nods slightly, an unspoken acknowledgement. Another avoids his gaze entirely. Outside the studio, his phone vibrates. Once, twice, then nonstop. Messages stack up faster than he can read them. Publicist, agent, friends, unknown numbers, missed calls, notifications lighting up the screen like warning flares. He doesn't open any of them. Across the city and the country, the clip spreads like wildfire. Not the whole conversation. Never the whole conversation. Just fragments. Public shaming masquerading as accountability. I'm tired of being spoken about as if I'm not in the room. At Dignity, TikTok loops it with dramatic music. Twitter dissects it line by line. Instagram Reels add captions in all caps. Reaction videos appear within minutes. Faces frozen mid-gasp, commentators pausing and rewinding, saying, "Wait, did he really just say that on The View?" Hashtags splinter instantly. Hashtag Team Orlando. Hashtag Sunny was right. Hashtag celebrity fragility. Hashtag let him speak. Hashtag accountability matters. There is no middle ground. Pundits rush to be first. Headlines harden opinions before context can catch up. Orlando Bloom pushes back against Sunny Hostin in heated on-air clash. Sunny Hostin challenges Hollywood privilege. Guest gets defensive. Awkward daytime TV moment leaves audience divided. Clips rack up millions of views in hours. Some praise him as brave, honest, finally saying what others won't. Others condemn him as entitled, defensive. Another celebrity unwilling to sit with discomfort. Sunny Hostin's mentions flood just as fast. Support pours in, viewers thanking her for holding the line, for not backing down, for asking the questions that matter. Critics accuse her of ambushing, of moral grandstanding, of turning conversation into confrontation. She reads none of it at first. Instead, she sits quietly in her office long after the show wraps, hands folded, replaying moments in her head. Not the viral lines, but the silences. The pauses. The look in his eyes when he said he was tired of being spoken about like he wasn't there. She knows this game. She knows how narratives flatten people. And she knows she'll be judged not for the intent, but for the impact. That night, late shows joke about it. Late-night monologues reduce it to punchlines. Memes circulate. Someone edits dramatic music under the exchange and calls it daytime TV's most awkward moment of the year. But beneath the noise, something deeper stirs. Comment sections fill with stories. I felt cornered at work just like that. I've been told to apologize forever, even after changing. I wish someone had spoken up like this for me. He should have just taken the criticism. That's what accountability looks like. No, that's what silencing looks like. The conversation expands beyond Orlando Bloom, beyond Sunny Hostin, beyond The View. It becomes about who gets to speak, and how, about who defines growth, about whether accountability can exist without humiliation, about whether public platforms are places for dialogue or verdicts. Orlando finally opens his phone late that night. He scrolls slowly, takes it all in. The praise doesn't comfort him. The criticism doesn't surprise him. What unsettles him most are the private messages from actors, writers, musicians, people with names everyone knows, and people whose names never will. Thank you for saying it out loud. I was too scared to. I wish I'd had the courage. Be careful. They won't forget this. He sets the phone down and stares at the ceiling. There's no satisfaction, no sense of triumph, just the quiet understanding that he crossed an invisible line, and there is no crossing back. Sunny, meanwhile, prepares for the next day's show. She rereads her notes, rewatches the clip once, just once. She doesn't regret the questions, but she knows this moment will follow her. Be cited, replayed, reframed, used as evidence by people on both sides of a debate that will outlive them all. The audience, too, carries it with them. People talk about it at work, at dinner tables, in group chats. Did you see that interview? What did you think? Whose side are you on? And maybe that's the real aftermath. Not who won, not who lost, but the discomfort that refuses to settle. The questions that don't resolve neatly before the next commercial break. Because for once, daytime television didn't offer answers. It exposed a fault line. And weeks later, when the clips are still circulating, when the arguments are still raging, when both names are forever linked by that single moment, one truth remains impossible to ignore. That wasn't just Pushback. It was a Rupture broadcast live. Now it's your turn. Whose side were you on? Did Orlando Bloom speak an uncomfortable truth? Or did Sunny Hostin do exactly what her platform demands? Was that accountability, or something else entirely? Drop your opinion in the comments. I want to hear it. And if you want more explosive, cinematic, behind-the-moment stories like this, subscribe to Stage View right now. Because some moments don't fade after the camera's cut. They echo.